Hey everyone, in this video we'll be taking a look at the latest Tier 9 USSR medium Object 283. I'll going over my setup that I use for this tank, as well as comparing it with the two existing tanks with similar playstyle. The first one being Object 432, another USSR Tier 9 medium, however that is the Tech Tree tank. And then the second one is Tier 9 USSR Premium Tank Destroyer TS-60, even though that's a TD, it does play very similar to Object 283 as well. So let's get started with my setup first. It is listed in description as well, in case you miss out while discussing it. So for my equipment, I'm using Advanced Loader, Advanced Concealment, and Advanced Optics. You can swap optics with Gun Stabilizer. I just want the ability to outspot anyone to the best of my abilities, so that's why I prefer both camo and optics. For my crew skills, I'm using Bond Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Snapshot, Silent Driving, Camouflage Expertise, Sixth Sense, Situational Awareness, and Track Mechanic. Because this is a rear-mounted tank and you can side scrape, that's why I have Track Mechanic, so I can quickly repair my tracks. Usually in mediums, I sometimes avoid running Track Mechanic and use Muffled Shot because I won't expose my tracks and I'm relying on camo. But because this is rear mounted, I can't play ridges effectively, and most of the times I will be spotted if I'm trying to play in city or so on. So track mechanics is recommended for this tank, especially because it doesn't excel at sniping. So let's get started with the statistic. The two things this tank excel at as far as rear mounted tier 9 tanks are concerned: it has fully rotatable turret, so it turns 360 degrees unlike the other two tanks. In addition, it has a good power to weight, top speed of 50, which is not the fastest, but it's workable. Anything less than 50 is a bit slow in current meta. And it has 6 degrees of gun depression. Now that's the good thing about these tanks. The rest of the stats of this tank is pretty average, especially compared to the other two tanks. The standard shells are AP with only 237 penetration. This seems like the older gun that T-54 or 432 used to have, where the standard was AP, but then they upgraded them to APCR. So maybe this tank in the future might also receive a standard shell buff where they are APCR. The tank does have a 360 alpha, which is higher than the average 320 alpha we are used to for USSR mediums. So you do make a little bit better silver, as the shell costs are similar. When you're playing 320 alpha tanks, you don't really make any silver, even if you're fighting standard shells, especially if you run premium consumables. Aim time of 2.3, accuracy of 0.36, both pretty average. But the main concern that I have with this tank is the DPM as well as hit points. It has sub 2200 DPM as well as only 1600 HP, which is below average for tier 9 medium. Again, I think the tank might get buffed in the future, like many free or earnable tanks, as this tank can be bought or earned with snowballs that you can earn by doing different ops. So there's no reason to miss out on this tank, as it is available for free or just with the op. And I think that's the reason whenever a tank that can be purchased or available to most of the players that regularly play, they try to be safe or cautious, and I do like that approach. And then after that, they look at the data and they do buff the tank. So if you ask me, it is always better the tank to be released in not an OP state and then get buffed accordingly. We have already seen it. Most of the season pass tanks, of course, they do release broken tanks time to time. But this tank is pretty average in its current state. But again, it is free, so do not miss out on this tank. As I mentioned earlier, it has 3 things that it does better than other rear mounted tank: is the fully rotating turret, power to weight, and does have a 360 alpha, which is not very common in World War II. I'm not even sure if there are that many mediums that have that alpha. I know Progetto and Silent B, however, those are auto reloaders. Most of the tanks you either get the 320 as well as or 390 alpha. So in this game, you saw I was fighting up close. I was also top tier, and I was able to pen most of my shots, and that was because even though standard pen and shell velocity is subpar, the premium is heat, and that is the your standard USSR 330 penetration, which is solid. You can go through every tier 10 reliably as long as you aim properly. And the shell velocity of heat is similar on what you get on your regular tier 10 Russian mediums. Not the fastest, but it's not slow either. So if you're in a position where you're kind of close to it, not sniping, this tank can perform okay, but not the greatest tank at sniping because, again, lack of premium APCR. For me, it is the worst of all the three currently, but as I said, I do expect it to get above. So in this game, yeah, in Province, I was top tier. Not that like in most of the other maps, it also has the worst camo out of the remaining, the three tanks. Slightly though, not by much, similar view range. So yeah, a decent game for a top tier tank. So now let's move on to our second tank, which was also available as a season pass, or was it ultimate season pass a few seasons ago, and that is TS-60. So one of the issues that I've noticed with Object 283 is that it doesn't excel at anything. It is kind of, I guess, a mix between TS-60 and 432, but in a bad way. So TS-60, it has better alpha, better standard shell velocity, better HP, better aim time than Object 283. So I wasn't a fan of TS-60, but after I played 283, I kind of started appreciating this tank. Not to mention the tank was buffed as well, as it now has 420 alpha. So as far as brawling is concerned, this tank outplays the 283 because of its alpha. It also has 2600 of base DPM compared to sub 2200 that 283 has. 1.7 seconds of aim time, 300 more HP. So not only can you out-trade or trade better, you also have more hit points, and of course, more DPM. The tank does have standard shells as AP, similar to 283, but has faster shell velocity on AP, as well as better penetration. So its AP rounds is your a standard heavy tank AP rounds at tier 10, so very reliable. But this does has 10 less of penetration on premium shell, which is heat. This tank is slower. It only goes 35, which is slow in current meta. But as I was saying, this tank, its role is kind of fighting. It's like more like a city-like tank where you can brawl really effectively in small maps or fighting up close. Doesn't do great at sniping, but it is better at sniping than the new USSR medium. However, you do really have to aim your shots. And that's what I was saying, like the 432, the tank will be going over next, that excels more in a sniping role. This excels at brawling, and then 283 is like a mixture. It has the alpha, which is in the more than 320, less than 420. But what kills it for me is a subpar DPM, 2200 DPM. It's not fun for me. Nonetheless, though, as I said, right, the tank is free, and we should get it. So TS-60 also has extra gun depression. It is 7 degrees, does make ridges a little bit more playable, and because it's a tank destroyer, you do get extra camo net bonus that TDs get. So even though it has slightly worse base concealment, when you put all the equipment and stuff, this does end up with a better camo. Camo and all, even 283 is playable. It's not like you'll get outspotted by heavies or anything, but it isn't broken either. So I would say average camo, below average view range. All these three tanks has 380 view range. I do expect the tier 9 mediums to have around 400. That's what I kind of consider acceptable. So 380 does kind of is a struggle, especially when the opponent is equipped with optics as well as the crew skills. And because it's 380, you are kind of forced to use optics if you want to be any effective in a scouting role, if you do have to spot something. If you have a base concealment base camo, base view range of around 410, 420, then you can even get away with not using optics as well, and you can use another equipment. But I think anything below 390 or 380, you kind of have to use optics, because medium tanks do have a role where they're supposed to spot not early on, but during the mid or late game. and it just makes it harder. So TS-60, we are in proc, just sniping. I did get lucky that I hit more shots than I should have in this game, but at the same time, you won't get that good RNG. Usually I just miss a lot of shots. Lucky for me, our team or the light tank was spotting, so I was able to stay in a position where I'm not spotted. They were trying to cross, so easy shots for the most part. I am using heat because as I was saying, it is slower, but for the super heavies, right, you do need that extra pen, 320, and the tank does have enough DPM. I wasn't confident that I'll go through the heavy tanks, but now looking back at it, I think APCR or AP would have banned most of these shots anyway. But I guess sometimes you don't want to take that risk, especially when your light tank is spotting. You don't want him. You just want to milk out as much damage as you can, or support your light tank before he dies, because he will eventually most of the time. Nonetheless, though, standard out pretty solid as well. Just now pushing, and that's where you notice the 35 km/h speed limit constraint. I wish it was a little faster, because when the game is about to end, you're not that fast if you have to rotate to the other side of the map, and you kind of miss out on late game damage. Also, running away, relocating is always an issue with 35 km/h. I would much rather prefer, as I said, at least 50. I would say 55 is or even 60. I would say 55 for a medium is good enough, where I could kind of run away from heavies, because a lot of the heavies these days do go like 40, 45, right? So in this tank, you can't relocate if a heavy is chasing you, but regardless, it is currently better than Object 283. Since it's TD, of course, I cannot use vertical stabilizer, but I don't use it on my mediums, or most of the mediums anyway. So that's why the same setup for all three tanks that we discussed earlier, and also listed in description. E100 showing his side turret, put a shot into his side, and waiting to finish, or waiting for my reload so I can take him out of the game. Do get unlucky there. And I do notice, though, by the way, that 330 seems to be a sweet spot where you can reliably pen most of your shots, and 320 you can get unlucky at times, where if a tank is angled enough, especially with your penetration low rolls, you might bounce more shells than you do with 330. 330 is the minimum pen I feel that is acceptable to reliably pen super heavies. Nonetheless, everyone on the 1-2 line is dead now, closing it to the other side. Again, I wish the tank was a little faster. It does have decent mobility though, like it is not sluggish, but again, the top speed is a constraint. All these tanks, they have similar armor. All of them have 80 mm of side armor, and more or less the same turret as well as hull armor, but I feel the 432 has the most reliable hull armor, as it's lower, it has lower profile, lower to the ground, and the opponents do end up bouncing or tracking the 432 instead of penning, compared to rest of the two tanks. And as I said, APCR shell velocity and penetration just makes everything easier. So last tank alive, T58, just rushing to get some damage. Unfortunately, as I said, too slow. If I was a little faster, I could have got 2 shells or 2 shots of damage. Nonetheless, 53 damage, still an okay game. And let's move on to our last and final tank, which is Object 432. This tank, again, its specialty or its playstyle is it excels at sniping early on, and then mid game or late game you can push forward as well. The tank does have less gun depression out of the other 3. It has only 4 compared to the 6 that Object 283 offer. This tank is, however, faster, but worse power to weight. It does have faster track as well as turret traverse as well, but the gun only goes 90 degrees left and right. And the TS-60, the tank destroyer, its turret arc is 136 degrees. Nonetheless, if you compare the overall mobility, it is similar to Object 263, just better top speed, slightly worse power to weight, but better rotation. It does have worse gun depression, but it also has the best camo out of all the three tanks, so you can snipe effectively. So that's where the limitation kind of balance itself out, because you're good at long range. That extra gun depression you can kind of get away with, at least early on. And then once you're at the flat ground 4 degrees, you can still make it work, because you are low to the ground, and you can see lower plate of most tanks easily. You won't feel that you are lacking gun depression on a flat ground, even if it's 4 degrees for this tank. This used to have the bad AP shells as well. Never enjoyed it, but now it is. Yeah, as I said, it's the tier 10 Object 140 or T-62. They all have the same gun. That's what the tank has, but you will not make money firing the shells. Same accuracy to the other medium, 0.36, similar aim time, 2.3 seconds. As mentioned, 2400 base DPM, which falls in the middle of the two tanks, 200 better than, or a little over 200 better than Object 283, and a little over 200 less than TS-60. So as I've said, this excels at sniping. TS-60 is better in brawling, and 283 kind of excels at nothing really. It's just average. It doesn't snipe effectively, it doesn't brawl effectively. So I think it's like the worst of both. So it kind of falls in a category where you have to play in between, not really sniping for the most part, or not really brawling, right? Depending on the situation. So you just have to make the best out of a bad situation for that tank. Even this medium, and which is a surprising factor, it has 1700 HP. It is 100 more than 283, and that's why I was surprised why it has that less HP, because the playstyle kind of forces you to brawl, right? But without the alpha HP and DPM, it is just impossible. With this tank, you can actually, or even with TS-60, you somewhat stand a chance to fight against the tier 10 medium, especially if it has already taken a shot. But with Object 283, you cannot. Even if a tier 10 medium is half health, it can easily kill 283, obviously considering both the players are of similar skill level. So coming back to this map, we have taken control over the field and now trying to peek the middle. I am worried about Yak Tiger though, as I don't want to take a shot in the side. I would like our light tank to move forward. The team is playing well though, as we have already won the field. We are losing by 3 tanks. And since the Yak Tiger was not really peeking, I decided to take a little bit risk, peek the middle, and started to get some shots on these heavy tanks. I think I kind of played this map or the tank perfectly in this map, as early on I started with sniping, then moved forward to help my team when the enemies was focused on our heavy or the other tank that was in the city, and I could just go in the middle and start punishing them. And there was the bounce. I have 1440 block damage. Put a shot into Yak Tiger. I also noticed that TD was pushing the 5 line, so decided to retreat. The score is coming closer, but then we lost a couple more tanks. Do take out Yak Tiger, however we are still losing by 3. And again, as that's what I was saying about the speed. Once you have like at least 50, 55, which this tank does, it goes 55, it's a lot easier to rotate out, especially when you have concealment. I couldn't have done that in TS-60 because it's just slow, and I could have done it in the 283. But as I said, the perfect way to play this tank, I was sniping, moved forward. As soon as I saw that we are losing, I ran back to the sniping position again, so that I can conserve my HP for a late game. And that's when the good games happen, right? You try to do as much as early on, but your team has to be losing a little bit so that you can then trade your HP towards the end. And that's how you end up with a good damage as well. So STB down to 1 shot. He got taken out by Tehran. There another medium AMX-30 pushed towards our base, and I was pretty confident that he doesn't have any support and decided to push forward, especially because he's a tier 9 and I'm full health as well. I was pretty sure that if you just go head on, as long as I don't get shot by anyone else, I should be able to outtrade the AMX-30. Yeah, that was pushing around the ridge. That limited gun depression coming into play. My gun just went up, missed my shot completely. Not that I would have panned him anyway, or even if I had more gun depression, because he went behind a ridge. Artillery is looking at me, and the medium is playing hull down as much as he can, as well as close to the water. I was hoping for some support from the artillery. Our artillery is not paying attention, but they're missed, and the AMX-30 has bounced or tracked me twice, and that's where I kind of more, this tank is the best hull for bouncing shots, at least for me, in my experience. He does end up penning better though. And him again, he's now in water. Another shot gets splashed by artillery. Unfortunately, I needed to high roll a little bit more so I can take him out. I do bounce, because I was too confident here that I'll pen him with RBRT, so I didn't really aim, and that's what cost me, as I had to stay there longer. It took another shot from artillery. Just waiting for my tank to lose the spot so I can go back to my team. They're all playing in the field, so it's better for me to be there, as the opponents still have 2 more tank destroyer, 1 Tehran as well as Death Star, and I am one shot for both of them. Again, speed coming into play as well as concealment, and now we are going back into the field. One of the issues I do have with these low alpha tanks, I wish they have more shell count. I don't think 45 or 50 is enough shells for mediums, because you tend to run out of them, and if you're playing long range right against tier 10s, you will not pen most of your shots. So if it comes to a late game, you might face yourselves running out of shells as well. It happens more often than I would like for it to happen. As also, like when you have low shells, right, you don't take some of the 50-50 shots, right, because you're like, I'm not gonna hit it, so let's not take it. Whereas if I had more shots like 65 or 70, like some of the tanks like Leopard, you don't worry about running out, right, and you take more shots, more blind fires, and you're not gonna hit any blind fires if you don't fire any. This is like a passive, I guess, nerf to all these. Not nerf, but like a balancing factor that you're just not actively punishing, right? Or not actively firing, taking shots that are 50-50, or even let's say 30-70. I wish every tank has just more shells. That's my 2 cents. I don't like to be limited of my capacity in a battlefield just because I might run out of shells. So 9 APCR remaining, 15 heat rounds. I am at 6,000 damage. Their artillery for some reason decided to play field without any of their tanks supporting them. One of them do manage to go back, and Tehran is spotted by our light tank. Again, coming back to the middle position I was playing earlier, Tehran is occupied by my teammates, and I can easily just side scrape here, especially since he's not paying attention, and just farm him. He can't go forward as he'll get shot by tank destroyers, and if he comes back, I'll punish him. I think he's trying to be safe from both me or city as well as field, but he can't. The best thing for him was to just take 1 shot and go back, but I think he wanted to get a shot or 2. As a result, ended up taking more damage than he should have. Down to 600, put another shot into him, down to 300. That's 7,500 damage. Their light tank is also down, and now the last 2 remaining tanks. Deaths are 1,500, and artillery at 800. If I'll give us a little bit more even, I might have even crossed 9k damage. However, just rushing forward at this point, I wanted to hit the 8k mark. That's kind of the sweet spot for tier 9 mediums. That's where you can kind of enjoy the result, at least for me. So just pushing in for Death Star, even if he fires, it doesn't matter. But lucky for me, he was just paying attention to Manticore. Put a shot into him, rammed him sideways, 280 damage, and I was hoping to get another shot. Nonetheless, still managed to hit 8,182 raw damage. So that's it for this video. As I was saying, 283 is the worst out of all the 3 currently. For me, obviously 432 is the best. Let me know in comments what you think about 283 and which one is your favorite out of these 3 tanks. Maybe you like TS-60, or maybe you just like 283. But at the same time, do not forget to redeem that tank. That's it for now. I'll catch you in the next one. Have a great rest of your day.